One of the things we strive for ourselves and for our patients is a sense of fulfillment, but it's not always that easy to achieve. There are issues surrounding it. How difficult can it be? What can you do about it? Hi, I'm Dr. Brian McDonough. Welcome to another edition of Primary Care Today on ReachMD. My guest today is Dr. Bill Schiemann. He is going to talk about these issues. He's going to talk about fulfillment and what we can do about it. And why don't we just start right out about this? You started with information, and it says we basically don't have high fulfillment among 80% of people. That's a high number.
It is. Thank you for having me on the show. It was a surprising number to us in the corporate work that we do with employee engagement and others like Gallup. They found that, Gallup found nearly 49-50% of people were not engaged. And in our research, we find only about one-third who I'd say are fully engaged in the workplace. A lot of people are partially engaged. And when we interviewed people more deeply about fulfillment in their lives, of which work is a part, 80% of the people were not what we would consider fully fulfilled. And we define fulfillment as achieving your dreams, creating a lifestyle that brings exceptional happiness and inner peace. So, we dug behind it, and a number of factors were there. And I think a big one was the balance in their lives between work and between family, between avocations that they have, health, and other aspects of their life.
Bill, part of it, when we do a story like this, we're talking about our physicians and how it impacts patients. But I got to believe just about any physician or healthcare provider out there, frankly, anybody's listening is thinking, yeah, that's me. I don't have that balance. How do I get that balance? What do I need to do? And how can I, make that balance better and more productive, especially in a world where you could probably go right across all sorts of jobs and across society, there seems the demands are greater and people are doing more than ever.
It is, and I think you're right. I think healthcare professionals are particularly in the line of stress because of the demands, not only of their job, but the type of work they do and the stakes that are on the line with patients. And I think one of the bigger factors, though, was when we interviewed folks like this, we found that a lot of them had just simply not taken the time out to really think through what would balance look like, what would they like their life to be. So it was kind of surprising how many had sort of just migrated over time into a routine that kind of just became the way of life. And so many then felt like I'm on a treadmill that, I can't control.
You talk about that treadmill. How do you get off? What are the things you think could be effective tools to try to get off that treadmill and yet, not lose your job?
Yep. Well, I think a big one is taking that time out. It doesn't have to be a long time, but it's one to say, if I were kind of starting this again, basically wherever I am in my profession, assuming I want to continue, I mean, how would I like to balance things? Where would I be? What would I like this to end up with in 5 or 10 years? Because that's a really key part. If you don't feel like you're on the path or you're headed somewhere that's leading to that fulfillment, it leads to a lot of frustration. I think another big one was working at an institution or organization where you felt like your values were similar. So people working in an environment where the values weren't there, it never seemed to get better. They needed to really think about working at a different place or working, whether it was in healthcare, whether it was university people. If you didn't like the structure or the university or the administration, it was really difficult. And I think the other one was this issue of practicing resilience. Nearly 95% of people we talked to had setbacks going on at work, setbacks at home, setbacks with kids, health. And I think the most fulfilled people had developed some mechanisms for dealing with the setbacks and getting around them. Probably the most prominent was having a mentor and some kind of a coach or confidant. Another was having just a good network of people, not being a loner, being connected in a way where they could could share share frustrations and get around them.
It's obvious you've done a lot of thoughts about this, and you work in it, and you're trying to maybe help other people through what you're learning, and just looking at the real facts and suggestions and techniques. What about someone who might be having done their job for 15, 20 years, or mid-career, maybe they're later in their career, and they just don't have that fulfillment, that excitement they once had? Is it time to switch jobs? How do you find challenges? Do you have suggestions for that?
I think it might be. I think one of the things you have to look at, when we did interview people who, they talked about going maybe 10 years beyond where they should have been, staying in the same role, same job, same institution. And most of them, when they finally left, maybe they were there 20 years, 22 years, said, I was kind of kidding myself. It was not getting any better. And I continued to doing the same thing, hoping I'd get a different outcome, which is kind of the definition of insanity. And most of them regretted it, saying, I really should have taken the chance, the risk. It seemed risky at the time, but many of them have left, done something else. Some of them retired and started something different. And most of those who had done that really talked about the latter part of their life with far more fulfillment than the rat race. So I think it requires, again, that time out to re-examine, where am I? Am I heading in a path? Am I just going over some bumps now? Or is this just going to be a trajectory of frustration for me that's going to make me unhappy?
When you look at that trajectory you're talking about, and you try to do these things, or do you have specific tips that can help people, like things they should start doing to try to make a difference?
Yeah, I think one thing, and I dealt with a number of folks who've been through one of my key subjects that I talk about in the book Fulfilled is this woman who was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And she was a vice president for human resources for a company. And she found that actually trying to map out your goals and decide what I need to do today that is leading to that. So when she got this diagnosis, 5-month sentence that she had, and she's somebody, by the way, the end of the story is that she's actually one of the more rare survivors. And she talked about completely aligning everything she did. She changed oncologists. She found oncologists that actually were hopeful and had a feeling that it could be beaten. She built a team around that. She had 3 daughters, one of whom was pretty negative, and she was pretty clear with her daughter that, I can't see you anymore if you're not going to be on the team to help me do this. So she built this great team, and she began thinking about all the aspects of her life, changing what I eat, changing my exercise. A woman who'd been a marathon runner, changing some medical things, both current medicine and chemo, alternative medicine she tried. But it was putting together this package in her life that was powerful in helping her focus so clearly on the goal of staying alive 6 months, then 9 months, then a year. And after she went into remission, she kind of rethought her life and did not go back to her corporate life, but kind of built a new direction around being a coach and working with other people who she could help get around this kind of a challenge. And I think one of the things she says is, hey, life throws you some real challenges, and you've got to build the resilience, but you also have to have a positive attitude, and you have to be able to move quickly to learn new things. As she didn't know anything about cancer, and so this was a learning experience for her.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Primary Care Today on ReachMD. I'm your host, Dr. Brian McDonough. My guest is Dr. Bill Schiemann. He is CEO of the Metrus Group. He's also author of the book Fulfilled. You can check his website, Metrus, Metrus.com. And when we're talking about this and we're talking about physicians and our patients, I know you have counseled and you've researched and you've advised people, Fortune 500 companies, some of the smallest companies. You've studied people in all walks of life and different jobs to gain the knowledge you have. What would you say to physicians in general in their own particular careers, with all the challenges I'm sure you're aware of that are out there, to make their lives more fulfilled and to do things? I know you talk about 5 steps and things, but what would you recommend?
I would recommend that, number one, you take a time out and you actually assess where you are, one of the things we found is that some of the most fulfilled people actually measure themselves pretty frequently. I mean, you kind of look at the Olympians like a Michael Phelps out there and say, yeah, they measure by inches, by seconds. But, the people did not always quantitative, but some did, and qualitative measures of where am I. Take a pulse every 3 months and say, where am I on a scale of 1 to 10 on fulfillment? And what do I think are the big drivers in my life that bring fulfillment? So, for me in my life, I have a pretty hectic, professional life, but scuba diving, and travel was a real avocation for me. So I found that that balance, that I had to do a certain amount of those things in my life in order to be a good balance. I have an allergist who does something similar. He has to go hiking and get a certain amount of balance in his life, which allows him to kind of take on the stresses that are part of his daily life. I'd say the other one is a lot of the people we interviewed found mentoring others and giving back to be important. I think it was a sense of I'm building a legacy, and I'm not just doing something in my normal work, but I'm also enabling others, or I'm teaching others, or I'm helping others grow, which I think was a real sense of inner fulfillment for so many of the people we talked to.
One of the comments I get talking with physicians, and there's all sorts, and some are very happy, some aren't, but one of the complaints a lot say, and is that they feel that they did all this training, all this education, and now many of them are working for others, and they're wondering why they're working for someone maybe who didn't have as much education or training, and that frustrates them. What about dealing with something like that?
Yeah, and I think, that's really no different in many ways than entrepreneurs that we interviewed who, they grew their business and they sold it to somebody, and now they're more of a cog in the big machine. And I think some of them adapt fairly well and said, I'm learning new things, it's exciting, or I moved up to a more, managerial role. But others had to leave. They said, this is not me. I'm an entrepreneur, or, I need to have control. What I do is much more of an individual sport for me. And I think, I've known too many doctors that end up in a larger system, frustrated, and, complaining about it every day and going home unhappy is not the solution. I think you've got to look at what your alternatives are, and with the skills and the competencies you have, actively seek it out. And I think doctors are particularly prone to this issue of I am just booked solidly, from the time I get up till the time I go home. And it's really hard to take that time out, but it's one that I think is well worth it to sit there and say, where am I on a scale of fulfillment? What do I think drives my fulfillment? And are there things I can control about that? Because if I can't, I'm going to continue to be unhappy.
I had an opportunity to look at your website prior to the interview, and it's obviously you've created a really interesting company with a lot of aspects to it with what your interest is. How did you get into this? I mean, what led you to decide this is where I want to be, this is the type of work I want to do?
A combination of things. I had been teaching actually in business schools at Iowa and Georgia Tech, and then took a job with AT&T when we had 1 million employees. I wanted to work at some large, very complex organization, and I did that. But I got frustrated with the inability to actually control and move things in an organization that large. And I was probably a little bit more of an entrepreneur myself. So, when I began working for Opinion Research Corporation, I was running a small profit center. We could kind of control our future, decide on our products that we were doing, and that felt great. And then when I left there, I really started this new business called Metrus. And what I like about it is the ability to work with so many different organizations, so many different jobs types. And I think that, for me, it kept me vibrant, kept me interested, and it was a chance to say, hey, here's something in financial services that could be borrowed and applied over here in the medical field, or here's something in healthcare that could be brought back over here to work for a consumer packaged good company. I think that's pretty exciting stuff.
One last question. It's my favorite question. I love doing this one. Is there something that you wanted to talk about? I kind of went in my direction on what you were answering or were saying, but something you wanted to talk about that I didn't bring up.
Yeah, I'll come back just to 3 factors that I think are really important. And this was a result of both the corporate research we did looking down from the organization and saying, gee, how do we get high performance, high productivity? And we discovered 3 factors that were important. Alignment, is everyone aligned and rowing in the same direction as the departments work together? Capabilities, do we bring the right capabilities to serve the patient or the customer? And third was engagement of people. And when we looked at individuals from the inside out and came back that way, we found the same 3 factors with a little bit different twist. The alignment was the values and my goals aligned with what's exciting about the vision of this organization. Some of the doctors, by the way, that was one of the frustrations. I had a vision in my practice, but now that we've been acquired as a bigger group, our vision's not the same. So that's a big issue. I think the second one's capabilities. What do I want to learn? Doctors, other professionals go out, they go to seminars, they learn continuously. But if you're finding that you're being forced to go into programs and training that are things that are not your interest, it's not very good for you. You're not really growing, and you forget that stuff. And lastly, passion. I'm excited to get up, every Monday and go to work and do the things I do. And I think a lot of people are excited about the work, but it's things around the work. It may be the boss. It may be the policies of the organization. It may be other factors about how people are rewarded that often kill it. So I think you've got to look at, where's my passion, and is this place, capable of engaging me in exciting things?
Well, Dr. Bill Schiemann, I want to thank you for joining us on Primary Care today. It's been a pleasure having you. We learned a lot, and I think you provide a lot of insight for our physicians who are talking about their own lives, but also, trying to work with their patients and the issues they have.
Absolutely. And by the way, we do have a Facebook page that we put up a few months ago called Fulfilled.Critical Choices. And it's a place where not only our material, but people are now coming in and bringing in a lot of material from different stories and examples onto that site. So if you're interested in more, that would be a great place to go.
Thank you so much. This is Dr. Brian McDonough. If you missed any of this discussion, please visit reachmd.com/primary care today. You can download the podcast. You can learn more on the series. I want to thank you for listening and being a part of the knowledge.